What's up, writers? Today is our last big official lesson before we spend a lot of time together working on those companion books that we've been teasing thus far. At this point, you should have a table of contents that's good enough that you could use. My suggestion was we should have 4 chapters in that table of contents. In fact, each chapter really only needs to be about a half a page to a page. So we don't have a lot of writing ahead of us, but that does mean it needs to be quality writing. We eventually will take a look at what an example of this would look like for the whole companion guide, but right now we're still thinking about this one chapter at a time. And so today, we're going to think about it one piece of evidence at a time and how that can push our writing to go further, to elaborate more. Let's check it out. Okay, writers. So, as I said, we are going to be trying to write more, to tell more, to say more, and that's what elaborate means, saying more. But we want to make sure that it's about the right things. So we want to make sure we've chosen quality evidence that'll help us with that. So we need to make sure that we're elaborating on important points and ideas. These should be your ideas. We want to see your writing, not a retell of the story. We need to also make sure that we are actually including evidence and citing it from the story so that we can talk about it. So either that's specific details and examples or direct quotes. And we're going to see a mix of both in our example we'll look at together. The first step, though, is asking yourself, before you draft your chapter, what am I saying about whatever it is? This should be like your point. What's your point? Why are you telling us this? Why does this deserve its own chapter? I personally, before you draft out your chapter, would put the chapter name and then write in, what's the point? And that'll remind you, I need to be going back to this. Second is, what details am I going to use that will actually support that point, that thinking that you have about it? Those details are the things that you'll elaborate on, that you'll tell more about. So let's see what this looks like in practice. We have a great example here from our professional example, the Hunger Games Companion Guide. And we start with thinking about, what is the author trying to say? Well, we're going to cut to the chase and say the author is really trying to tell us something about hunger. They're making a point about hunger. So we'll see what point they're trying to make. Follow along with me as I read. Hunger grates on the people in District 12. It grates on almost anyone who doesn't live in the capital of Panem. Hunger is a constant theme in Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. But hunger doesn't actually come close to defining what happens to Katniss Everdeen and everyone else she loves in District 12. It doesn't describe what happens to emaciated little Rue who comes from the agricultural district. The word starvation, or possibly the phrase starved to death, is a lot closer to the truth. We know this is true from the beginning of the Hunger Games when Gale holds up a loaf of bread. Katniss says she has goat cheese from Prim, and Gale comments that now they have a real feast. The Hunger Games, page 7. If a feast consists of bread and cheese, they're not getting all that much food. So if we think, what is the point that she's making about food? The author. It seems like the author is saying, first, hunger is a big part of District 12, the place where our main character lives. They're saying it is a constant theme. It comes up. It's a big part of it. It affects everything. In addition, she makes a comparison to another character and saying that actually hunger isn't even enough. We need a stronger word. So she's making the point that even though it's called the Hunger Games, it should be maybe called something even more strongly worded, like the Starvation Games or the Starved to Death Games, although I don't think that has quite the ring. And so she makes this point. We keep asking ourselves, what are we trying to say? What is the point we're trying to make? The point she's trying to make is that the conditions here in District 12 are much more brutal. Really, for anyone who doesn't live in the capital, much more brutal than just the idea of that they're hungry. I'm hungry. Sometimes I get hungry, but let me tell you, I am not starving. You can probably tell. So with that in mind, that was our point. The point was we could make a much more strongly worded name. At least that's what it appears to be. That hunger doesn't really capture it all. It's more than that. I'm about to be interrupted by the bell going off. So, pardon me. What details, though, can we use that will support that? And I love that we see here evidence towards the end in paragraph 3. In paragraph 3, it says, we know this is true. Second sentence of paragraph 3. We know this is true. To me, this is like, we know, transition phrase. It's getting us into this evidence that we're going to introduce. And this evidence, so far, at least at the start of it, is just paraphrasing. It's just paraphrasing, and it doesn't get to quite the level of detail that we'd like. I really like to get into the nitty-gritty of the specific details. Now, it does eventually say, Gale holds up a loaf, Katniss says, goat cheese, Gale comments. But here's the part that I really want to point out to you. Not only was the author picky about choosing this small, tiny scene, they were picky about only quoting real feast. I don't know about you, but when I think about the idea of real feast, I'm thinking about the idea that Thanksgiving, or a giant hall with a table that's 100 feet long, full of roasted pigs and chickens. I'm thinking of so much food that I can't even see it all, let alone I couldn't eat it all myself. Yet, this evidence here, highlighted by the quoted part, real feast, shows us just how hungry and starved they are. So this is our evidence that we're being picky about, that we're quoting directly, that's important. And they finish this final paragraph with a sentence that's a explainer sentence, an analysis sentence that tells us why this matters. This evidence matters because it shows that if you consider a piece of bread with cheese to be a feast, you're really not getting all that much food, are you? So that's why we need to be picky. Because if you couldn't tell what her point was here, especially after the evidence, especially after she then explained it, well, then we have another issue that we need to deal with. So this is really honing in on what the point is that the author is trying to make. We said that was number 1. And number 2 is the evidence is something we can tell more about. We told all about hunger leading up to this. And if we wanted to keep going afterwards, we could. But we won't. So, final page to think about. Today, we should finish with a newly drafted chapter. The first step, though, is to choose a chapter that you're wanting to try from your table of contents. Once you've chosen that chapter, as in right now you should be looking at it, look at your chapters. Look at your table of contents that has your chapter titles. Once you chose one, what's the point of your chapter? What are you trying to say? I would write it down. I would, in your journal, go down below your table of contents, rewrite the name of this chapter, hyphen. Write in what is the point that you're trying to make, hyphen, and choose a structure that's going to really support that. A structure that's going to fit best with the point you're making. And then that evidence that is going to be specific and picky that is going to go along with the point you're making. Hopefully we can find that in our book, have it set aside, be ready to use it when we need to. Hopefully we even found it earlier in our journal. So then we can flash that draft really quickly, incorporate that evidence, and write more about that evidence. Okay, writers, until I see you next time, happy writing.